Today we're going to talk about why guys suddenly grow cold and distant. I've come up with the top 10 core reasons for why this occurs. Now, we've all been in a situation where we have fallen for someone and they haven't exactly returned our feelings. But usually at first, before the initial rejection occurs, there's this feeling or hope that this person feels the same way you do. And they do things to make you think that they do. But then they don't. They become distant. They don't respond to your text messages anymore. What I want to explore is why this occurs. And I thought probably the best way to do this was to talk to real people, real men and women who have experienced this cold factor. Why all of a sudden are their partners growing cold and distant? Well, let's get started and talk about those top 10 core reasons. Reason number 1, they're entertaining the idea of someone else. This one hurts, I'm not gonna lie. It always sucks to hear that you aren't the only person in their orbit. But it is entirely possible that one of the reasons they've grown cold and distant is they're starting to entertain going out or dating someone new. Now, there's a lot of different ways that you could determine if this is occurring or not, but probably the best way you can figure it out is by simply watching their social media accounts. Are they updating their Instagram or their Facebook pages with new photos of them going on dates with other people? These are pretty standard ways you can find out. Reason number 2, the thrill of the chase is gone. We often talk about the honeymoon period on this YouTube channel. You know, that magical period of time when you first start dating someone new, everything seems great, they can do no wrong, you can do no wrong, you're just living on cloud 9. But eventually, after the honeymoon period kind of has some time to dissipate, things grow a little boring. Well, there are some men who will just get addicted to the thrill of the chase. And when that thrill is gone, when they feel like they have gotten you or accomplished what they were setting out to do, well, they all of a sudden lose interest. They're not as interested anymore. And I think this has to do with that stability and mystery scale that I'm always talking about, and how we have these two conflicting needs in relationships. We have, on one hand, the need for stability, and on the other hand, the need for adventure and mystery. Well, someone who does a great job of creating the thrill will often have a very adventurous side or a mysterious side, a very adrenaline-filled side. But usually that thrill goes away when you sort of set into more stable habits. And this can make men think that it's supposed to feel this way forever. Well, it's not. Some men get confused in that way. And so they're always going from relationship to relationship, trying to fill that thrill cup. Reason number 3, investment inequality. Well, this one's pretty simple. They're no longer invested and slowly start getting annoyed and resentful when their partner tries to become closer with them. Everyone invests a lot into relationships, especially when we really like someone or are falling in love with someone. Generally speaking, in a perfect world, there would be an equal amount of investment from your part and his part. But we don't live in an equal world. Often what happens is when you grow to like someone, you start feeling the feelings of this could be it, you have a tendency to overinvest your time, energy, effort, and emotions. And usually when you do this, when you overinvest, guess what happens? They grow disinterested. They aren't really going to invest or match the investment. So here's the general rule of thumb. Anytime you're going out and dating a new guy, you should match your investment into them with their investment into you. Reason number 4, it's a defense mechanism. We're going to have to kind of dive into attachment styles to really understand why this could be a guy's defense mechanism, why they suddenly grow cold and distant overnight. Really, this is an avoidant trait. Someone who is an avoidant values their independence so greatly that they will literally break up with a partner or become suddenly cold and distant if they feel that that independence is being threatened. So the general rule of thumb when you go into a relationship with someone or you're in that talking phase is this: when they pull back, you pull back, because that is the sort of secret key to the avoidant. And it's extremely hard to do at first because it goes against everything you have been taught. It goes against everything that you want to do. I mean, how often is it that when a guy pulls back, you pull back? I mean, it's supposed to be when a guy pulls back, you try harder. You have to fix this thing, but that's not how it works. Doing so can trigger an avoidant tendencies. So as a defense mechanism, they'll grow cold and distant and kind of try to push you away when you feel or they feel you're getting too close to them. Reason number 5, they're worried about hurting you. Have you ever been in a relationship before or a situation where you really did like the person that you were taking out on dates, but you didn't really like them to the level that you were willing to commit to them? At the same time, you like them, so you don't want to hurt their feelings. So often what you do is you kind of are afraid to tell them the facts, which you know will hurt them. I'm not really in love with you, or I'm not really thinking about going into or getting into a relationship with you. So instead you do the immature thing. You pull back, you become distant, you stop responding to text messages all the way. It's entirely possible that's what is occurring here. And usually the mistake most women make is when they experience a guy who is sort of exhibiting these tendencies, they try harder. It's that whole investment thing. When they like a guy, they overinvest into the relationship. They do the opposite of pulling back when he's pulling back. Real quick, I want to say that if you're new to this YouTube channel or you're trying to figure out what you should be doing to get your ex back and you're trying to learn if you even have a chance in your specific circumstance, probably the smartest thing for you to do is actually stop by our website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com, or take our Ex Recovery Chances quiz that can be found at exboyfriendrecovery.com. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, taking that free quiz is super easy to do. All you have to simply do is look in the description link below this YouTube video and click on the link you see there. It will take you directly to the quiz where you can fill it out and get an easy answer on what you should be doing going forward and overall what your chances look like in your specific situation. All right, so let's get you back to the video. Reason number 6, there's too much fighting or arguing. This is kind of a subcategory of defense mechanism. I was once in a relationship where there was nothing but constant arguing and fighting. And it got to the point where it almost became a norm. And eventually I just stopped wanting to talk to the girl. I stopped wanting to engage with the girl. So my solution was to become cold and distant. I stopped responding to her text messages. I was a little rude to her text messages. Sometimes it's entirely plausible if you have a relationship with a guy, or not even a relationship, a situation where you are talking to a guy but you can't get on the same page on things, where you're constantly fighting or arguing, and this becomes sort of the foundation upon which your relationship is built, that they may protect themselves by pushing you away. Reason number 7, they can't communicate what they're feeling. This is kind of funny, but I actually think probably the best analogy I can give you here is with children. So children often are not great communicators, but they're great actors. So what does that mean? Well, it means if a child is growing jealous of another child playing with a toy, what they will tend to do is go over to that child and start pulling their hair. Now, they have no other way of communicating because they really haven't experienced or learned the proper ways of communicating. So they take action, they do something, they take the toy, they pull the hair, they push the kid. What they're really trying to communicate is, I want to turn. But they don't know how to communicate, so they push and act. Well, in relationships and as adults, there's hopefully no pushing or fighting in that way. But what tends to happen is their way of communicating is through distance and being cold and being a little neutral with you, not as hot, more so cold. This is their way of communicating. They don't know how to have a proper communication of, what, I'm just not in the mood for that, or I'm just not really in a place where I'm ready for a relationship right now. So instead, they grow cold and distant. Reason number 8, the avoidant tendencies overcome them. So attachment styles is really the core to understanding why human beings act the way they act in relationships. There are 4 core main attachment styles. Secure attachment, which is kind of the holy grail of relationships. Anxious attachments, which is kind of where most people end up falling into when they are on the receiving end of a breakup, for example. They are so anxious to fix the breakup that they want to do everything possible. They usually beg for their exes back because their entire existence is wrapped around this one relationship. So anything that threatens that relationship makes them grow anxious. Then we've already talked a little bit about avoidance in this video. Well, an avoidant is the type of person who will value their independence more than anything else. And if anyone threatens that independence, well, guess what? They tend to push people away. And then, of course, we have the fearful attachment styles. Fearful attachment styles is kind of the combination of both anxious and avoidant tendencies. So it's taking the worst of both parts of the relationships and kind of combining it into one. We're going to throw that out. Most people don't have that. Usually when we find men growing cold and distant, it's because they are extreme avoidants. Not only are they a combination of all the factors that we talked about above or previously, they're really going to get overcome or overtaken with their avoidant tendencies. So what's the way you can determine this is happening? Well, one of the calling cards of people who are avoidant is they will suddenly stop talking to you. They will suddenly push you away. But as time goes on, they start to reconnect with you. And a lot of times we're finding people who are typing into Google or typing into YouTube, why is my guy cold and distant? Well, they've had a guy who is being cold with them, and then after some time they come back and kind of flirt with them again, and they're left wondering what is going on. Well, what is going on is an avoidant person will begin to have nostalgic reverie after enough time has gone by where they allow themselves to miss the person, and they want to re-explore things with that person. So if this is happening to you, it could be a situation where your guy is getting overcome by his avoidant tendencies. Reason number 9, they think the honeymoon period is forever. Now, we've already talked a little bit about this concept, but let's kind of shine a spotlight in it. There are a subset of men who are extremely immature about relationships, in which they literally base their entire relationship thesis on the fact that the honeymoon period is how they should feel all the time. Meaning they need to find someone that can make them feel this way all the time. But the definition of the honeymoon period is literally what must go up must come down. And the problem is they haven't been mature enough to realize that and to fight through maybe some of the arguments you have after the honeymoon period is over. So if you're finding a guy growing cold and distant on your first fight after the honeymoon period, it could be a situation where they have a misconception of how relationships really work. And finally, reason number 10, stress outside of the relationship. This is often overlooked, but it's just as important as all of the previous factors. Let's imagine you're dating a guy, and the guy suddenly grows cold and distant. No explanation for why, you just notice they're not as responsive anymore. They're not as into talking to you when they do respond. What is going on here? Well, you also notice around the same time, they start to have a lot of problems at work. Every time they do talk to you, they are bringing up work. Maybe there's a family member that's kind of ill. Maybe they have a cat undergoing a life-threatening surgery. All of these are really common examples of stress that can happen outside of a relationship. Now, how does this affect relationships in general? What ends up happening is they only have the mental power to focus on a few things at once. And so what they do is they make this quick calculation in their head. They think, okay, I've got her, I've got my sick relative, I've got this work stress. I can only focus on 2 of these 3 things. So I'm going to neglect her a little bit to focus on these 2 things until I can figure those 2 things out, and then I'll focus on her. But that's not ever what ends up happening. What ends up happening is as they start neglecting you and focusing on these 2 areas, you hold a grudge. And you start making their life kind of miserable because they're aware of the fact they're not giving you as much attention anymore. As a result, they turn around and give you attention for a little bit, but grow there's some animosity there. And oftentimes that can lead to breakups or lead to them losing their feelings. So here again is the ultimate goal you should always be trying to do with people who have these type of cold tendencies. When they pull back, you pull back.